So this is going to be a two-parter, and we're going to ask some questions about seeing and information and what's good to know and what's not. I'm going to just open with a story that someone once told me, kind of like, I assume it was a joke and not a true story. But there was a man who went overseas and he got his neighbor to look after his cat. And so the man called home asking how the cat was going with the neighbor. The neighbor replied, "Oh, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but, your cat went on the roof somehow, fell off and died." And the man overseas said, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible. I can't believe this, I can't believe you told me this way." And the neighbor said, "Well, what was I supposed to do? It's the truth. It's what happened." And he's like, "Well, you gotta, break it up, like ease me into it. Like, call me, when I call one week, you tell me the cat's on the roof. And then when I call the next week, you say, oh, the cat fell off the roof. And then the third week, you say, unfortunately, when it fell off the roof, the cat died." And he goes, "Oh, okay, all right, I guess I could do that." And he goes, "Oh, so how's my football team going?" And then the neighbor goes, "Oh, your football team's on the roof." So a terrible, cheesy joke, I apologize. But on one hand, sometimes we have this idea that there's a benefit to not knowing things and not knowing the truth. There can be upsides to it. White lies and everything else. Lies of omission, and it was in your best interest. Now, the counterpoint is this film. When I wrote the blog on this, I'm basing these two episodes off the blog post. I called it the best film you've probably never heard of. It was See No Evil, Hear No Evil. I think it was 1979, and it stars Richard Pryor, a famous comedian, legendary comedian, and Gene Wilder, the actor. Very high soaring actor. He's no longer with us. And in this film, one of them can't see and the other one can't hear, and then they kind of both witness this crime. But obviously they only get bits and pieces of the information. They actually mistakenly believe to have killed someone, even though they're obviously just witnesses, but they can't piece together the actual truth because one of them couldn't see it happen but heard stuff, and the other one saw someone walking away but obviously couldn't hear, didn't turn around in time. And so there's this whole, definitely a real kind of downside to not knowing and not seeing. Now, I raise this question because part of the theme of this podcast, and you're here listening to it, so you must be somewhat on board with this journey. Part of the theme is learning more, learning deeper, seeing more, being more self-aware, understanding where our thoughts come from, and then learning to actually write them ourselves. And we uncover a lot of muck, and there's a lot of muck and a lot of darkness, a lot of dirty, dark little secrets about how things work in the world to kind of get to. And so it begs the question, it's like, when do you know too much, and when is it just painful, and is it worth deep diving so far into things? And I guess, and I wrote about examples from a couple of films like See No Evil, Hear No Evil in the blog post, and in Is Ignorance Just Bliss? But then I reflected on what is the ultimate, I guess, Hollywood movie. And I chose Hollywood movies because obviously more recognizable, easy to reference. But The Matrix, I thought, is the ultimate example of that. It is the ultimate example of, if you look at that story, it's Neo who's, in the everyday world, and he's kind of just going through the motions, and it's all weird. And then the whole beautiful reality he lives in is shattered by Morpheus, and it's the whole decision of the blue pill or the red pill, right? And it's from memory, I hope I don't get them the wrong way around, but I think the blue pill is you wake up back in your bed tomorrow and this was all a dream. The red pill is we keep going deeper and you learn more about the Matrix. And when they show him behind the facade, obviously, of the existence he's come to know, it's this dark and stormy world. It's horrific. It's not the place we want to live. But apparently it's the place we do live in, but it's all masked. What a powerful analogy for society. Everyone wants to walk around all day and not be aware. They want to kind of keep it out of mind what's really going on and the dark and dynamic of the world. And so it's this ultimate freaking dilemma. And Neo is really faced with it in the Matrix. So for me, personally, I think the journey I guess I've been on so far, I've seen some terrible things, just to be honest, about our whole culture around charity, around international development. I've talked about it in bits and pieces in the pod and in writing, but I saw some things that were very discouraging, very frustrating about that whole sector, from humanitarian aid down to local charities. And I guess those perspectives, if I voiced them and communicated them, probably not be received very well. Education's another one, obviously. That's the core focus at the moment. And when I've reflected on my journey through education institutions and those of people around me, and then the research and the exposure I've had through my work over the past couple of years, it's there's some very alarming things going on. There's some things a lot of people don't really appreciate the effects of how we're raised in our culture and kind of commissioned to go into the adult world. But there's also plenty of people aware, but this stuff is kind of, I guess, dark and discouraging. It's easy to get very down about it and become very cynical. And we've seen, the Julian Assange approach to, using information and the truth. Even from things like the personal limitations on people and the kind of psychological barriers that a lot of us have, and the the dog stuff. So just reflecting on it personally, the things I think I've come to understand a bit better can be very ominous as well. I mean, they kind of show maybe what's wrong, but you see a lot of stuff, operating the wrong way and operating maybe unhealthily. So, I'm not going to deliver a particular perspective or answer today, because I just want to leave the time for you to kind of reflect. And even if you're listening to these episodes in batch, maybe you'll take even 5 minutes or 10 minutes to just think about your own answer, because although it'll be easy just to go to the next episode and hear a bit more of my take, to actually fire the neurons in our brains, and this is all about independent thought, this podcast, right? To actually get that process happening, it is obviously better, much, much better for you to first run the thought experiment and look at where knowing information has been useful in your life and where it hasn't, I guess. And then we can come, I guess, to the next episode. So thank you very much. I'm going to draw the line there for today. Thanks for tuning in with Joe Wehbe Podcast once again. Obviously, we'll be back again tomorrow. But obviously, in the meantime, just remember, of course, as always, that the best way to open 1,000 doors for you is to concentrate on opening doors for others.